Welcome to Alternate Endings.
Half audiobook.
Half podcast.
Full apocalypse.
New episodes every Monday.
Start your week considering how everything could come to an end.
This short story is titled Mind Over Matter and was written and voiced by yours truly, Ivan Wayne. The following is an audio recording from a mind map healing group. Everyone responded in their own way to the new wave of possibilities when the technology entertainment product known as Mind Map was released. This recording is from a person who's part of a group of people that are talking through their life experiences one time a week and helping one another cope with what has happened to them since the release of Mind Map. Groups like this exist in every town, a group therapy of sorts for people living through strange times. Record-breaking unemployment, suicide rates unlike anything the world had ever seen, and homelessness nearing 50% in some areas of the country, the United States is still in a panic as to what comes next. Some countries weren't fazed. Others were decimated. Unsurprisingly, the countries that did not adopt or have access to mind mapping were not adversely affected by this new technology. Regardless of how people were afflicted, there is no question, if you lived in the United States during the time when Mind Map was released, your life changed. It just depended on how. Here is one person's reflection as they share their story with a group. Hi everyone, my name is Matt. I suppose I can start by telling my story in particular, then sharing some of my thoughts about this whole mess. The things we always talked about as kids was being able to read someone else's mind. How cool would it be to read other people's thoughts, know what they really were thinking, and get inside their head? We wanted to be mind readers, see in another person's head. I remember thinking I wished I knew what animals thought. We all wanted to talk to our dogs and cats, but we also wanted to read our parents' minds. Parents wanted to read their kids' minds. Lovers would enjoy getting an open box of their partner's thoughts. And as you all know, this mind map thing we eventually ended up resenting in some way wasn't exactly that. It wasn't what we thought at all. It's still surprising to think we had that kind of technology that quickly. No floating cars, no teleportation, but we got this. We couldn't read one another's minds, but we did have mind mapping. I will always remember the first time I tried it out with my friend. He's dead now. I got pretty close to ending things on my own, but luckily I had better support systems in my life who helped me through it. Plus I got lucky. But back then, he and I were in his room. We were like 23 or 24 at the time. You only had to be 18 to buy a mind map. 18! Can you imagine being 18 and experiencing this for the first time? Although I guess maybe younger people could handle it better without as much life experience. Maybe. I don't know. We were in our early 20s and we couldn't handle it. Most people couldn't. That's how we got here, I suppose. Anyway, he bought the mind map, wanted to share it with me for the first time. We were best friends. I still think about him every day, hence me telling his story here for you. I miss you, buddy. But in his room, I'll always remember the first thought I had once we turned it on. I considered myself, Matt, from my friend's perspective, and the intensity of that experience was more than anything I have ever endured. I had tried mushrooms twice before, acid once, and it did not even compare to the intense and surreal nature of thinking about who you were from somebody else's brain. I did not like it. It made me feel useless and like everything I tried to put out there in the world was for naught. Everything I had ever tried to accomplish, make people think about me, blasted against what people actually considered me as. This was my best friend. He would certainly think of me closely to what I thought of myself, right? Not at all. When I thought about me from his perspective, he loved me as his friend, but he also saw me as a completely different person than who I thought I was. I remember not wanting to consider myself while in the mind map. And then it all started to unfold right there before me. Chairs, his bed, the TV screen, the posters on the wall. It was amazing. It's kind of like how a new car makes driving exciting the first time you take it out and about. Same streets, Same drive home, but now you're in that brand new car, and it's exciting. It's fun. You look for reasons to go to the store again so you can drive the new vehicle. This was the same kind of thing. Literally anything I could look at and consider was fascinating because I was getting to live through my friend's thoughts and think about everything from his mind, and I wasn't even thinking about it like me. I got to consider the world from somebody else's brain, and he was the same. He wondered why I thought of his room like that. I don't even remember how I responded to him at the time. You all know, talking is so difficult with mind map running. It's a strange process to go through the vocab choice of another person and describe ways that they would usually describe things and explain the thoughts that they would typically have. There's always that slip of awareness that you're not those thoughts, and perhaps that's part of what drove us all mad. My friend, he would end up killing himself less than a year later. The last time I spoke to him, he seemed so lifeless and so tired. I don't know exactly why he ended up taking his own life, but I do know he was on a rampage of mind mapping for a long time before he went. He'd mind map with strangers, anyone he could meet, and get to agree to sit down and swap thoughts with him. He once told me a few months after we first tried it in his room that he went downtown and found some homeless folks. He mind mapped with them, said it was incredible. Hard to explain what they think of the world is how he phrased it, I think, but he loved it. Also said he was very sad for them, and mentioned how mind mapping with people with psychological disorders was definitely the most trippy. And somehow that turned into sorrow, and he took his own life eventually. I suspect he thought life was useless. I don't know, that's how I felt. All the thoughts we have ever had, all of them, they're not real, they're so subjective. Nothing is true. It's almost like we're not true, especially what I thought of myself. Anytime I mind mapped with someone and thought about myself, as in, me, Matt, from their perspective, it drove me a bit more insane. Why even get up out of bed every day? Nobody agrees how anything is, not even something as silly and mundane as a plastic fork. I remember mind mapping with my mom and thinking about trains. It didn't even make sense to me what she thought about trains, and I just thought less of her for that. I know that sounds bad, but it's true. I couldn't stand how anyone thought about anything because it was always nonsense compared to what I thought. And that was my turn. I began to think about my thoughts being nonsense. If I thought everybody was so silly, what would make me any different? I wasn't different from anyone else, and all my crazy thoughts were just like everybody else's. I began to doubt any of my opinions, and I started to feel like an empty speaker of random and useless banter with myself. I began to feel like any thought I had was useless, so why continue? After my friend, when I found out he was gone, that shook me. I realized now the path I was on. The same fate would have happened to me eventually. I shook myself out of it. Well, that took a while. It was not easy. It was not overnight. Because then we saw it started happening to a lot of people we knew. Everyone around me was unwinding and degrading into self-hating, self-questioning, confusing, scared versions of themselves. When it became a public health issue and the commercials for help began, that's when I knew I wasn't alone. And I had good people in my life. My dad actually helped me out a lot. Somehow knowing this technology was to blame and we weren't fitted for this type of thought, that also made me feel better. I know, it seems selfish or weird, random maybe, but it's true. Realizing this wasn't just me in my own head, my own paranoia, was powerful, and it's a part of what saved me. It helped me start to realize all this was normal, in so many words, and that's what kept me going. It kept me employed. I know a lot of people quit their jobs because they felt, well, I guess I don't know and I won't assume how they felt, but when unemployment spiked, I remember thinking that I was glad to have not gone down a darker path. I still showed up to work and actually got a promotion, actually. I guess you could call me one of the lucky ones. I assume many of us here would say the same about ourselves. That's why we're here. And we're not dead. We're not destitute, walking around, or whatever else could have happened. We're not zombies of self-doubt, self-critique, and an existential dread that cripples us from being human anymore. Look how many homeless people are around our city this morning. It is absurd. 95% of those people were not homeless before MindMap. It still baffles me how the company who made this did not get into any legal trouble. I know plenty of people tried, but it's a shock it never turned into anything. I mean, when a chunk of the population turns up dead because of their inability to deal with this new technology, you'd think that there would at least be some form of repercussion. I know some people ended up dying because they were just overwhelmed by others already following victim, and so it's not exactly directly in line with mind map, and that the sorrow was contagious, but it's all such a mess. It exhausts me to consider the whole journey I've been on and how I got here today. My friend who I tried mind map with at first isn't the only person I've lost in my life either. I've tried to help others I've known get back on their feet, some good and some not so great. All we can do now is begin to understand this is how it's always been for us. We just never knew. We have to understand the subjectivity of reality has always been around. We just weren't privy to it. I guess some of us could even say we've embraced it. I know of someone who was a realtor. Actually, she still is, and she's doing quite well. She employs other realtors now, and she's the CEO of a company she started for real estate, and she built all of that after Mind Map was released. When this new product was advertised, she knew how well it would work for her business. She no longer needed to interview or ask her clients what they wanted. When they came into her office, they would mind map, and she could think about perfect home choices in the place of her clients. The client didn't get to mind map her, of course. They only used the one-way map. Who knows what kind of time her clients would have had getting into their realtor's mind for a few minutes and getting to think about the world as her. Anyway, my friend knew exactly what her clients wanted in minutes and didn't need to go through an entire list of questions, walkthroughs, or anything else to know the ins and outs of their perfect, ideal dream home. It really was astonishing how well she used Mind Map. They would begin, and then she'd bring up all the options on her tablet, and she would go through all the housing options as she was mapping to her client's brain. It's brilliant, really. But she loved the technology. And I'm sure there are thousands of others who could tell a similar story of adapting to enhance their own lives or bring customers what they wanted or make their jobs even better. I imagine therapists attempt to use it, I guess that would make sense. My friend, the realtor, she did lose her marriage, though. She hadn't even tried to use Mind Map for much else besides work, but she got curious. Too curious. Like all of us. At least she didn't die, though. Never was suicidal to my knowledge. But she brought the mind map home with her. She wanted to use it with her husband and allow them to swap thinking as one another for a bit. He was hesitant. He already knew several people were not doing well after buying a mind map. Her husband understood how his wife used it for a business, and he enjoyed her success with it, but that didn't mean that they had to bring it between them. He refused at first, but I guess after so many times, he reluctantly agreed. Now, I'm not sure if he knew what was going to happen, or if this was just a general fear. When they began mind mapping, she did the natural thing we all end up doing. She considered herself from her husband's mind's perspective. And I guess she didn't like what her husband thought of her. Whatever it wasn't good. She tried to shake it off, but she just couldn't. The irony. Something she used to make her career better tore down her personal life. When the mind map ended with her husband that evening, she didn't say anything. It took 6 months of her own anxiety, doubt, and dissatisfaction to end things in a divorce. He argued with her time and time again that he didn't feel that way. But after you've mind mapped, how can you deny it? Plus, he would not mind map with her again after she accused him of not loving her anymore. That was all the evidence she needed. And I know she's dating again now. She told me she refused to bring mind map out of her realtor office. It's not a bad idea, using this technology for one purpose and limiting its possible negative effects. Rather smart when you think about it. Wish I had considered that. If you can direct your thoughts and not get lost in the rabbit hole of the flimsiness of reality, then this tech could actually be useful. It's kind of inspiring, and it could allow us to connect in a way that wasn't previously possible. Not everyone has a bad story, but here we all are. We're here because we had some kind of negative experience that requires us to now meet at these events and talk about it. I mean, Jessica, you mentioned a few weeks ago about your brother. That was tough. I don't mean that in a bad way, Thank you for sharing. But when you told that story, I hadn't considered anything like that. For people who don't know, do you mind, Jessica, if I... Her brother got into a lot of trouble because he began mind mapping with children. He couldn't get over how exciting it was to think about the world through young minds, to be a child again and full of wonder, curiosity, and natural love for any new thought. But he got obsessed. And eventually he kidnapped a couple of kids. Is that right, Jessica? Yeah. He kidnapped a few children who wouldn't let him mind map with them. To our knowledge, he did not do anything beyond that. I'm not accusing him of kidnapping children. I'm just clarifying. That's all he was doing, is trying to mind map. And, well, I guess if you take a single child, much less multiple, things will not go well from there. I haven't ever mind mapped with a child, but I can assume it's fascinating. I didn't know many children. The over 18 warning probably kept most kids off the machines. However, just like alcohol or smoking or drugs, you know there were children that got a hold of mind map without supervision. Probably did not go well. Although, I'm unsure if they would have such terrible effects like us adults. Maybe kids would be more resilient, more adaptable to seeing the world as somebody else. They expect less from life, have less expectations of what they should or should not be when they're that young. Perhaps they'd actually be better fit for this kind of experiment. Consenting, of course, but something about this entire concept was so hard for us adults, people of the United States, to reconcile. Like I said before, I guess we just weren't ready to peer into the abyss of something we already thought we knew. We all knew our thoughts were our own, but to feel that as somebody else was just too much. And now more than 20 million people have killed themselves in this country alone. People claim the end of the world for a while. Others join the hysteria. Did anyone ever think how this technology was so cheap from the start? How were they able to sell this device for less than $500? I think about that a lot now. Aren't most things really expensive at first and they get cheaper over time? Maybe the company knew how much it was going to sell, or perhaps the technology was just cheap to make. Maybe we already had this ability for some time. Not to get too conspiracy theory, but it's possible. I mean, that price allowed millions of people to buy this device within months. It was a popular gift, great thing to get as a family, huge Christmas gift. Or so people thought. There were no warning labels. Zero. I mean, alcohol bottles, cigarette boxes, they have warning labels. This device didn't at all. None. And look what happened. I mean, how could they have not known? Didn't they do test runs with focus groups, sample it with some small groups of the population? Did their testing subjects not freak out when they considered the world through another person's mind? Who knows? Maybe the test subjects did freak out and the company put it out anyway. Wouldn't be the first time human lives have perished at the expense of making a few people rich. But none of that situation adds up. If I'm honest, this is part of what brings me back to this group week in and week out, is thinking about this. Personally, I'm doing okay. And I also want to help you all through these times. But one of the reasons I come back here week after week is the frustration that nobody's being held accountable. I know me being here is not going to force anyone to pay for these crimes. I know this country has always followed money, but isn't this different? It feels different. Enough people died. We couldn't host funerals fast enough. And isn't it weird to look around at people at these funerals and say, hey, we're all here because of some weird technology that allowed this poor person to unwind their sanity. People couldn't handle thinking as somebody else. When I first was about to experience, I thought the future had arrived. How exciting this was going to be. It was going to change things for the better. Who knew where we could go? I didn't think it would be 2 steps back. And yet nothing has been done by this company, the makers of MindMap. Some states outlawed it finally, but many places haven't. Our state hasn't put any laws out against it. Someone will buy MindMap today. Isn't that incredible? How is it still floating around out there after we've seen the destruction it can cause? Hasn't this proven unsustainable? Not only is MindMap not being held accountable, but we're still giving them money. It just eats at me every single little day. Like, honestly, who is buying MindMap now? Teachers who want to know gaps in their students' knowledge? Custom chefs making their guests the perfect meal they've always wanted? I guess the psychic mind reader gig is up, huh? But at what cost are people still willing to use this thing? They know the danger. Perhaps, and this is sometimes what I think, maybe I'm just weak. No offense to you all, but maybe we're weak. The people in our lives who suffered, maybe they're weak. We're just part of the population not cut out for getting to think as someone else. Many people in this city, in our country, they are just fine. Perhaps they've had some personal snafus, but they're doing okay in general. Is it something wrong with us? Are we just the unlucky ones who weren't cut out for the truth? Are we just incapable of seeing truth in the face and how subjective all our thoughts really are? How flimsy Our thoughts are, no matter how much we try, we can never account for how someone else thinks of us, or anything for that matter. My parents have one. They still do. They never struggled. Ever. Is that strange? I'm not sure. They used it a lot. Still might. They might be using it this weekend. I don't know. I don't know if they ever mind map for their jobs or for professional reasons, but I do know they would bring people over and use it. Their friends, other acquaintances, and they never had a single issue with this. Maybe that's what allowed them to help me so well when I was struggling. But what enabled them to handle mind maps so well? What had my parents already gone through that let them put this device on and handle it just fine? They had to have considered themselves at some point through another person's eyes, and how'd they reconcile that? How did they see how their friends perceived them and not be bothered at all? Were they already more aware of how other people thought of them? My parents were both always very thoughtful people. They were big thinkers, I guess. Nothing that resembled a monk or anything, but they were always very thoughtful people. Always considering things, how they treated other people, if something was okay, if something could be better. Is mindfulness the answer? Were they already prepared because they had considered these angles before? Or are they just more okay with how flimsy our identity is, and how all of our perceptions just aren't true? As you hear me ruminate here today, you'd think that I'd asked them already. But I haven't. I haven't even asked my own parents. I never really thought about asking them why. I don't know. I don't think I want to know the answer. That would illuminate why I was weak, why I almost took my own life from this little shift in what it means to think and process information. Perhaps I just can't handle the truth. Brings me back to the weakness. I guess I'm kind of putting the puzzle pieces together here. I didn't ever ask them because I couldn't handle what they might say. It's probably going to make me feel small, stupid, or incapable. I don't know. But now I want to ask them. I'm unsure if I could handle their answer, but I still want to ask. What are the ingredients in a human brain that allows us to wear this machine? What makes it so hard for many of us to peer into that void and leave our own minds behind? Are most of us truly that fragile? I remember mind mapping with this girl I used to hang out with for a while. Thinking about what it was like to be a woman from her perspective is something I sit here before you unable to describe. It was so fascinating to be in her mind and think about the experience of being a woman from her life and memories. She loved being a woman. I guess it's more complex than that, but there was this mixture of feelings that made me realize that she felt completely different about womanhood than I could have ever predicted. Somewhere along the way, that stopped being interesting and exciting, and it turned to dread, anxiety, and sadness. I know mind mapping ruined sex for some people. I knew this guy who had mind mapped with his girlfriend at the time while they were getting intimate. Said it was amazing, like nothing he had ever experienced. Couldn't be satisfied as a man, or at least himself, after that, and was not able to enjoy sexual activity unless he could mind map with the person he was doing it with. His girlfriend did not enjoy it as much, and they didn't last too long after that. He was always insisting they mind mapped. I'm not sure if it was about experiencing the person's feelings as they made love to him, or if it had to do with the female aspect of how that felt. How many people can say their phone, their laptop, or their new TV broke up their relationship? This was an entertainment device that broke people's marriages, relationships, and happiness in half. It seems kind of silly now. Who knew? Who knew a device that would allow us to think as someone else would unravel society? A device that should make us more kind, more empathetic, and connect us better. Perhaps it did make our new world more compassionate and more caring, more understanding, but only for those who made it out on the other side. Is that the price we pay for being better connected, more aware of other people? Do we have to weed out the people in the process who just can't handle it? Perhaps there were just too many of us out there who weren't ready for the truth. We weren't ready for the power or level of introspection and chaos our identity might go under when everyone shared their thoughts, their true, uninterpreted, actual brains with one another. I wonder if mind map will be illegal someday, or will it just go on and get normal? Like, considering how alcohol used to be illegal under Prohibition is a fascinating story. Alcohol was deemed too dangerous for society and became illegal. But now, we wouldn't think of a society where alcohol wasn't in grocery stores, liquor stores, gas stations, everywhere. The alcohol didn't change, just our mindset did. This isn't to say that alcohol even got safer. We just altered how we dealt with it. Perhaps the same is going to be said about mind map. Nothing's been done yet. Perhaps people will get used to it. Kids will grow up being able to map onto another's mind from a young age, and that'll make them ready for it. The mind map experience will influence how people grow up, how they mature, and they get used to being an adult. It's kind of like the internet. We wouldn't think of a world without Wi-Fi everywhere now, and yet there was no Wi-Fi for most of human history. Perhaps Mind Map will be that someday. Normal. Everywhere. Hard to think of a world without it. But today, for now, for me, it's a hard pill to swallow. With everything I've been through with the people in my life. Many of us here have lost people to this new technology. Some of us lost part of ourselves that we're not going to get back. We are the transitional generation, grappling with what to do from here. And I appreciate you all of you, your candid honesty, and for those who show up here regularly, you all help me. And I hope I've assisted you through this weird time. And I am realizing, wow, that I have been rambling for quite some time. Thank you for being patient with me today. I tend to not talk too much at these events. I've always thought that my story and the things that I went through aren't half as bad as some of the things that you all have told. I knew today coming in here that it would be my turn and that I shouldn't be discouraged to share and that I shouldn't compare any of my grief to yours. That's why I remain quiet most times. But I do get inspired by you all. And I really appreciate what you all share about how people in your lives fell prey to the ability to mind map and mix their realities. I suppose that's what I have to share today. I hope that we can all do right by one another and get to happier, more positive days ahead. I know some of you still use Mind Map today, several of you, and that's inspiration. Honestly, it is. Please help me navigate my future and how distant or close I will remain with the technology. I'm not swearing it off forever, but I am also very hesitant and I resent Mind Map for a lot of reasons. I guess that would have to be all I have to say today. Thank you to everyone here.
Thanks all for listening. Check out the next episode where we discuss and review this story. We hope to see you there, as long as the world doesn't end before then.
We would like to thank Kevin MacLeod for his music found on Incompetech.com.